So right off the bat, I'm going to apologize if you have any internet cutting out. I've noticed on the last couple of videos that they've started off a little bit choppy, but ended up okay. So hopefully we don't have any issues, and if I do, let me know, but also just be patient with me. I'm not sure quite what to do about it. Interestingly, Facebook does them, and on our Facebook page.
What is that?
What's in there? The mystery ingredient for the week. I kept it in a... At the market, they keep it kind of in a sawdust, and so I wanted to keep it breathable yet dry. This is a very small portion, well, relatively small portion. Let me wipe the screen just to make sure it's clean for you guys after all making. Of yam. Right, you're probably looking at that thinking, that's not yellow, orange. What are those extra little hairs? This is a true yam. When you go to the grocery store, the sweet potatoes and the yams labeled separately. The yams that you get at the grocery store, probably, they're orange, are not
True yams.
Well, they're not true yams. You probably have what is a sweet potato labeled as a yam, probably. And it is not a true yam. Sweet potatoes, both the yellow kind and the orange kind, they're just a type of sweet potato, are just sweet cousins of your average potato. That's why they're sweet potatoes. To market them in the US, they label the orange colored ones as yams to distinguish them, but they are not a true yam. The true yam comes from Africa and from Asia. You can see it has a white, this one has a white body. What do they call that? Anyway, there's other ones that have the same brown outer skin, but have a more yellowy inside. The African yams that are white are a little bit more milky, would be a nice way to say it. The ones that are yellow are a little more dry. And then there's an Asian kind that has a white skin. It looks really similar. It's got these speckles on it, all these dots. And sometimes if it's not really been, I don't want to say shaved, but you see the little hair. Is not sweet like the American sweet potato yam. It is more akin to a potato. So most often, if something calls for a true African yam, you would not replace it with an American yam sweet potato. You would replace it with a regular potato. There's few exceptions, and I'll explain one of those in a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
So, talking about it, it comes from the Diosauria. Comes from African, different African dialects. Yam, yam, something like that, and it means to eat. So it's a staple. It's not just a staple. It's a major staple. About 150 million people consume 200 calories a day or more in yam. A huge portion of that is going to be in Africa, and a huge portion of Africa, it's West Africa. So Nigeria and Ghana, the yam is their friend. Nigeria grows nearly 60% of the world's yam. One hectare of yams can produce 10 tons of yam, or as much as 30. There's some places that produce 29 or 28, 29 tons of yam per hectare. The plantains that we did last week, actually they're one of the hugest, biggest proportionately producing plants for all of the staples. Actually, that was really interesting to discover that plantains are hugely productive for the amount of space that they take, tonnage per hectare. And the yams, so they grow underground, just like a potato. They are a tuber. It takes quite a bit of work to take care of them while they're growing. I don't really know all of the details on that, but I do know that they can get quite large. So, we're used to sweet potatoes kind of having a typical size and shape. These yams get really big. They can get as big as 50 feet. So you've got this huge underground mound that you're caring for. It kind of reminds me of like maybe the whale harvest here in Alaska, when they, not the whale harvest, but in the northern part of Alaska, when they do whale harvests, they bring in one large whale. The whole village is going to be in on taking care of this whale. Well, although not typically 50-pound yams, they do have a huge festival every year in some of the West African countries. It's a huge deal. Sometimes it's just a day, sometimes it goes on for weeks, and it has to do with the changing of the seasons. The new year comes when the yam harvest has been collected. The day before, they eliminate all of the yams from the year before, and then the new day, they have all yam-based recipes, and they start their new year with all new fresh yams. So the yam's a really big deal. The true yam's a huge deal to other parts of the world. Yeah. So I'll show you one of the very first things that I was learning about yam. The native African people of West Africa, they will typically boil the yam and then pound it with a big stick. And I kind of talked about this last week with plantains. You can do the same thing. They pound it in a giant mortar and pestle. I don't know the name of the big mortar, but you can do the same thing in a smaller bowl, which I also mentioned last week, called an asanka. Not to be mistaken with the Ghana word for thank you, which is asante. But asanka, it's kind of like a textured bowl. So you have the spoon and you take this boiled plantain and you mash it, and what it's doing is it's breaking apart the fibers and the proteins, the starches, not the proteins, but the starches in it, and it starts making this dough. And the longer you pound it, the smoother that it gets. Well, yay to the modern world. They've kind of figured out how to make that faster, and you can get Nyan Instant. So this is, I apologize, you can't see the whole title. It's Ola Ola. For about $6 even here in Anchorage, I got yam powder. It's ground, probably already pre-boiled, and so all you need to do is add water to it. It's not really that different from what we call fakey flakes or instant mashed potatoes. You add the water, and then I don't have a giant mortar and pestle, and so I just simply kneaded it. I got it mixed really well, and I kneaded it. Now I made 2 different batches. The first batch, I just added boiled water to the dough, and then I kneaded it. Well, this is not a very, that's going to be a bad idea. Forgive me here. All right, I'm going to keep it in the bag. This is yesterday's. So that didn't form as much into a ball. It did form into a ball initially. The second time I tried it, and I would suggest this, is super easy and really fun to do with kids. Like I said, even if you use, it might work with potato flakes, even if you use potato flakes, boil it, and then for anyone who's ever made Play-Doh, your Play-Doh, you cook your Play-Doh in the pan, and it starts getting done when it starts forming a ball and kind of a skin. The second batch that I made, I allowed to cook in the pan for a few minutes and get a skin on it. And then after that, and again, this is yesterday, so it wouldn't look like this is kind of dried. I just wanted to show you. And it's only colored because the pan I used had some leftover tomato in it. At that point, you can knead this dough into a dough. It's like a bread dough. It gets really smooth, and what they do... Hey, Nathan, can I have a towel? What they do with their meal, it's called fufu. F-U-F-U, fufu. It's a major staple. You can have yam fufu, cassava fufu, or plantain fufu. Same process. You boil it and you mash it, or in this instance you have, thank you so much, the flour. That wouldn't have stuck to my fingers like that if it had been fresh. The pre-made flour that you add with the water, and you knead it, and then you would take a bite of that with your fingers, and you would use that to dip in your stew. This is what similar to the way that the Asians, Japanese, Chinese, Thai, they'll take some rice, they'll dip it in their soup, and they'll use it as a utensil, as a means to get the broth into the mouth. And it's also a major staple. So though not particularly flavorful, and they don't really they don't add spices or mixes to their fufu, it's simply carbohydrates, and it fills your tummy. And then you eat it with your stew that may or may not have meat, depending on your local diet. But very commonly, a West African meal that you might have with the fufu would be a fish stew. And so that's the first recipe that I made today. Uses whole yam pieces, not just fufu. And I use smoked salmon to make an Alaskan version, as well as salted cod. And it's a tomato based. And so we know that tomatoes are from the New World and yams are from, I don't want to say the Old World, but they're from Africa. I did bring myself a fork. They use some of their kind of warming spices Some people throw a curry powder in there, but I like to have a little more control than that, and I want to put specific ingredients. So this one uses bay, and it uses coriander, and it uses nutmeg, and then I use grains of paradise, which is basically the pepper of the Western African coast. In fact, it was called the Grain Coast because this grains of paradise were harvested there and kind of competed for a little while in Europe. It didn't. Eventually, the Portuguese killed off the market with some particular political taxation and other things. So grains of paradise, poor guys, they never made it. Pepper won out. But grains of paradise, and then the yam, boiled yam. The true yam doesn't take very long to cook. Potatoes take a long time. The true yam is, it cooks quite quickly. About 10 minutes is going to be about all that you need to boil some yam to a place that it's edible and not too mushy. I mean, if you want it mushed, by all means, you can just boil it more. This has carrots in it, but you will regularly see that very orange flavor of a Ghanaian or a Nigerian fish stew. For this Alaskan version, I used some smoked salmon from my family. Let's see if we can get it to focus on that. Maybe it will. No, well, then it's covered in sauce. It brings a wonderful smokiness. In Ghana, it would probably be smoked mackerel or any other kind of smoked fish. But I know that smoked mackerel is pretty common. And then I used salted cod here that I had salted myself. I know it sounds really bland, but it's really quite interesting and very cool. You can have it with crackers and cream cheese and other things. This is a great kind of a snacky thing. I'd use the word romantic. I tend to say that, but they probably would use salted tilapia, maybe. But you can make it with fresh fish if you don't want salted or smoked fish or whatever fish you like. You can make it with chicken if you want. And if you don't have yams, then go ahead and use potatoes. Don't use sweet potatoes because they're different. The yams of Africa are not sweet like sweet potatoes are. So that was my first dish. Fufu, to be eaten with African fish stew from Nigeria and Ghana. I wanted to branch out a little bit and try something that wasn't from Africa, although that is where the yam is so commonly used. And so I headed over to China, where they have that other kind of white-skinned yam. This is the same kind of yam. Now I use the African yam. And I made a chicken soup with goji berries. Again, you want to make sure that when you add the yam to the soup, you add it kind of at the last minute. The goji berries are interesting. They're not, when you think of berries, you usually think of sweet and fruity. These are a little bit kind of nutty, and their flavor's subtle. Other than that, the soup is pretty typical. I use green onions and ginger, and just a broth. So then the yams, they're your starch in there. If you wanted to make this dish and you didn't have yams, you could go ahead and just use potatoes. You wouldn't really know any different. Oh, that one's for the wild friends. This one has no heat. Excuse me. The African stew typically is going to have chilies in it. And they usually use Scotch bonnet chilies that are similar to a mild habanero. Scotch bonnet chilies are really hot. I was using bird's eye chilies, Thai chilies. Or oftentimes I use serrano chilies if I need something with heat because that's what's available here. I don't really want to use jalapenos because then it always tastes like Mexican salsa to me. The last dish uses the yams differently. This one, instead of having boiled yams or mashed yams, has actually a baked yam. And so you can't tell, but it's more firm. Maybe you can hear. Maybe you don't want to watch my mouth that close. I'm not sure. You have no choice now. It's crispy. What's nice about the yam versus the potato, in which this is a dish where I would say do not replace it with potato. I would say what's nice about the yam is that you can put it in the oven and bake cubed yam for about 10 minutes and you get a nice crispy outside, and the inside is still not completely cooked and it's crispy. If you had a potato that wasn't cooked all the way through, it would be rather unpleasant. Nobody really wants to eat crispy uncooked potato. This is not very flavorful. So that's one thing that the yam is definitely where the yam differs. It cooks faster than potato. It can be cooked in all the same ways that potato can, but you can actually leave it slightly uncooked, or probably uncooked altogether, and it would be fine. For this, I rinsed off this, and before I baked it. They do say that there's another word for it. I don't want to call it slime, but it's kind of slimy. They do say it can be irritating to your skin, so I wouldn't want to touch your eyes or maybe an open sore if you were dealing with it. But this dish hails from Thailand, actually. So with it, I made a dressing with garlic and garlic chili paste and lime. Not very much lime, olive oil. So it's got a really nice little bit of heat to it. I really like this dressing. I'm actually going to look for other things that I can use it on. A little bit of sesame oil. I'm trying to think if there's something else particularly in it. There probably was. That's kind of it. Ginger, and a little bit of fish sauce. Just a little bit really brings out the depth of the flavor. For anybody, fish sauce is a little scary. I don't want to say get over it, but it can bring so much flavor. Just a little bit can bring so much flavor to a sauce or to a dish without you feeling like you're eating fish or smelling fish. Like, I tend to not smell the bottle when I'm cooking with it because it kind of turns me off to it. But I like what it brings to the dish. You could also use Worcestershire if you wanted to. It's a very different flavor, but kind of getting that aged, fermented thing going on if you're totally afraid of fish sauce. That's my secondary fallback. So this is cucumbers and bell peppers. I should have diced them all about the same size as those roasted yams. That is a sweet, spicy kind of kick. The recipe I made is not terribly spicy. If you want more, just add more sriracha to it. The yams are crispy, and then to fill it out with some decent substance, it has imitation crab, which Nathan really likes, but he probably won't eat this because it's spicy. Fresh cucumbers. And then the last kicker for it was the addition of ground nuts or chopped nuts on the top. So you get that crunch, you got the crispy cucumbers, and the bell peppers are crispy, and but even the baked yam is still kind of crispy. So those are some of the things that I did with the yam. I don't have a huge number of other things to share about it, although we did laugh at one point that you could take and make, you could make fufu, and if you were to make stew, using maybe the only thing that you had available, perhaps some wild rabbits, you could make little bunny fufu. I'll give you a moment for that. I hope it's funny for you. The other thing, basically, that I decided, it's a fantastic ingredient, and I definitely look forward to cooking with it again. However, considering that you can so easily replace almost anything that you would cook with it with a potato, I would say here in Alaska at the $7.30 per pound rate, I'd rather use potatoes. But if you live someplace where it's much cheaper, then I definitely suggest giving it a try. It's a good food for children. It's not weird. It's not textured weird. It doesn't taste weird. It's very mild. So you can put it in something that maybe they're familiar with. I'm always interested in teaching kids to try something new. And outside of the fact that a lot of cultures tend to make spicy options, simply leaving the heat out, you can introduce your kids to some African flavors or Asian flavors, the goji berries, just some different things that are not bizarre, but unique. So that's what I've been doing this week. And plantains, for anybody who really watches me. You've been watching my daily breakfast of plantains from last week. It continued over to this week. If you have any recipes that you like to make with true yams, you should let me know in the comments. I'm always interested in trying some new things. If you've learned something new, let me know what you found the most fascinating. And I just simply encourage you to try some new things. Perhaps this week it'll be yams. Perhaps you just said, hey, maybe I'll try an African dish, or maybe that smoked salmon in soup sounded good. I'll be back next Tuesday live on YouTube. And if you want something a little bit more casual, Nathan was interested in kind of coming to hang out. He didn't necessarily have a lot to contribute to this one, but on Fridays we do a family Facebook time that's a little more casual, talks about what we have going on. So I encourage you to try new things. I encourage you to cook at home and save yourself money. I encourage you to cook with your family and spend time with your family. So if any of those are registering with you, please check us out on Facebook and on YouTube and on Instagram and on Pinterest and on Twitter, which is just a regurgitation of everything on all of those other sites. And follow us along. Eventually, one of these days, I will be showing you some new things, maybe from the road, where we're traveling and have run across some new ideas from someplace in America, or maybe someplace overseas where they've got some different things. So, in the meantime, keep creating, and I will see you again next time. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.